Hello and welcome to our panel session. Do you obsess over your customers? I am Nikki, partner at Ignition Lane. Thank you for the intro. I am super excited to see you all here today. And we're going to talk about our little obsession. Okay, it's kind of a big obsession because over the last decade and a bit, we've seen really a mammoth shift in the way that customers engage with businesses. Today, we all now know that the balance of power has shifted. Customers have much higher expectations from us as business leaders, and they have way more ways to express themselves across multiple platforms to engage with us. They have much more decision-making power, and they're much less likely to stay loyal to your brand. Our first response to this as businesses was to get really good at marketing, to drive sales and to drive brand loyalty. But we're now at a point where we have to incorporate the customer in all of our decision making. So today we're going to explore, dissect and discuss how customer experience is evolving and how the customer is important in this new era and how we'll sink and swim as businesses. We at Ignition Lane have been incredibly lucky to work with all of our panellists really closely. We've witnessed your customer obsession firsthand, and we've loved the way that you've translated that into success in your roles. And we've really excited about tapping your wisdom today. So, intros at the end here, we've got Jane, who is currently Head of Technology and Operations at Carsales, of course, one of the first great tech companies to emerge in Australia. She has been a leader in combining tech and the customer. In the middle there, we've got Kelly, who is National Marketing Services Manager at Metricon, the biggest home builder in Australia. Kelly has the most unique perspective about the customer because she's literally working in a bricks and mortar business in this digital age. And finally, we have Chris Frid with over 30 years experience, I can't believe it, in tech. You wouldn't think to look at him. He was the first MD of Xero in Australia, scaling it from 7 people to over 300. After having a really long career at Microsoft, more recently he has been investor, CEO and board member at quite a lot of SaaS startups, so a wealth of experience. So let's get into the questions. First questions for all of you, maybe Jane kicking off with you. We're all obsessed with customers, but we all have had that light bulb moment. We weren't born obsessed with customers. What's your story about that light bulb moment?
So, hi everyone. So my story probably started really early on in my career when I was still a software developer. So back at Carsales, quite a lot of years ago, we ran a program called Voice of the Customer, where we got our technology team, our developers really, to sit in and listen to calls from the customers, mainly complaints about their problems. So I clearly remember listening in on a call, and we had a customer complain about something that they thought was a really big issue. But when I was listening on a call, it was actually a really trivial fix for me. It was just go back to my desk, 2 lines of code, and fix the problem for the customer. But being able to listen in and understanding the impact of what our technology team, the changes that we make day to day, how it impacts and how it helps the customer, that was a really big moment for me. And from then on, really, it's every decision that we make, it tying it back to the customer and what they're looking for and how it benefits them and how it helps them, really. That was my moment.
How about you, Kelly?
Yeah, for me and probably Metricon, I think. A few years back, can you hear me okay? A few years back we did some research we were asking our customers about their experience with Metricon and building their homes. And the researcher at the time had a fantastic idea. He said, I really think when I do the debrief, it would be incredibly powerful to bring one of your customers into the research debrief and to actually have them talk to the rest of the management team about what their experience is. Because he said, I think it's really going to make it stick. And so we invited this customer in. She had no idea who was sitting in the room. The managing director was actually sitting in the room and lots of other very senior people. And to hear her speak firsthand, and a bit like Jane, with a problem that had been ongoing for her, a totally unnecessary problem that we just had not been able to fix for whatever reason was a real eye-opener for the business. And for me, I think a real light bulb moment for the people that were all sitting in that room to understand, again, the same thing, which is such a small problem, but we had made it such a painful experience for our customers. So it really was a light bulb moment, and I think for the managing director as well, who is now the biggest customer experience advocate. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it did it for him as well.
Before we go on to you, Chris, I know you've got a million light bulb moments, but it's really important point you make there, Kelly. Like you have that light bulb moment, and your managing director is now a customer advocate. How do you spread that sort of that enthusiasm for the customer and your sort of revelations?
I think, again, clearly we will all talk about research and understanding your customers and talking to your customers. So at every opportunity, if we do research, it's sharing the research and those insights as widely as possible. We recently had a sales and marketing conference. We had 3 different people come in and talk about customer research and trends that they're seeing in the marketplace. And again, people walked away and said, that was just amazing. It was so good to hear about our customers. And a lot of them, sometimes you forget that the sales manager, they might see customers all the time, but they're not necessarily hearing that research. So the more broadly that we can share those insights and make sure that people are thinking about the customer and have it top of mind, the better it is across the entire organisation.
Chris, 30 years, you'll have a few stories.
That was scary hearing that. 15 of those were at Microsoft, and there's probably, thinking back about that time, my perspective on customer experience was very much around sort of the UI component. I think Microsoft for many years was the benchmark of writing good software in terms of its look and feel. And then I joined Xero, and I think Xero is a great example of a customer-obsessed organisation. And my light bulb moment was early on in Xero. Employee number 4 was a guy called Phil Fearlinger, who was the head of design globally, and he's a really interesting guy. In fact, it's probably the first time I've seen someone really lose it in meetings. Like he was anything to do with the brand externally. It wasn't just product; it was marketing and everything. He would literally throw things.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Complete nut job. So, but I heard him talk once about how they approached accounting, because if you think about accounting, the way it was marketed and packaged and sold was very much, I'm buying accounting software to do tax. And it was like, well, people don't go out and get excited about spending money to do tax. And a really good example, and he spoke about how Xero came up with the whole bank rec process. Does anyone use Xero here? Yep, so do I. And so if you think about, so what he explained, he said, look, the way of doing bank rec, pretty boring, but it's a matching process. And the idea that he came up with, and Phil's background was actually designing gaming applications. So he wanted to gamify it. How do we actually create something that's addictive to the user, which is a very different approach in terms of accounting, because accounting up until then wasn't exactly addictive. In fact, a lot of people would prefer, root canal surgery without an anaesthetic instead of doing their bank rec. And in fact, bank rec was something that was done monthly or even yearly. So if you think about small business and cash flow, the important thing is knowing where you're at with cash. And so the ability to get small businesses to do cash flow on a daily basis meant they knew where they were at cash. So how do you make it addictive? And so he came up with the idea. He's actually playing with his 3-year-old son. And they used to play this card game where he would match shapes, in a card deck, and you'd find the matching deck card, and then you would take that pair, and then you'd take them out of the deck, and they were gone. And he thought, well, that's actually bank rec. So we're going to match bank transactions with transactions in accounting software, match them, and then magically it'll disappear. And then if you do the bank rec, it comes up with that little thing. I mean, this has been around for a while now, so it's not that exciting. But at the time, I'm thinking, well, this makes sense. So you get to the end of your bank rec, and this little tick comes up, and congratulations, you finish your bank rec. It's like, oh wow, that's sort of addictive. So you get that dopamine hit, which is, I want to do another bank rec. But it was really interesting hearing a guy who had built gaming applications, taking that same sort of customer experience and applying it now to accounting. And I think that was the difference. That's where Xero really sort of started to think about how do we make accounting sexy and cool. So that was cool. That was a light bulb moment.
Awesome. I think for me, there is nothing that demonstrates the rise of the importance of the customer and customer experience more than the fact that you increasingly hearing the term customer experience in investor earnings calls. Who would have thought we'd see the day? Chris, as an investor, what do you think has changed to make that more important?
So no investor wants to invest in shit software.
But
Sorry,
we-
I swore. So
No,
but I
but-
mean no. And there is actually a really important financial imperative behind that.
But for a long time, we trusted the founders to sort of create software
Yeah.
and thinking
Well,
that they knew
Yeah,
like,
I
what
think
was best, right?
I think I mean consumers, whether it be B2B, B2C, you're not starved for choice. There's a lot of really good software out there, and it's only getting better and better. So your benchmark becomes quite broad, and so customer experience. Your customers are going to look elsewhere if it's not a great customer experience. I mean, we've all been around products that we use day-to-day, apps and things that provide a great customer experience, and you can't live without. And it's really trying to find that must-have component, that utility that you really can't do without. And they're the sorts of that's the software you want to invest in, where you can see that you can drive market share, you can get adoption of the technology because they've really figured out that must-have. And then you see applications where just little things in it don't kind of work well, and you sort of go, well, what else haven't you sort of factored in there, or what other things haven't you actually thought about that become really important? So it is about stickiness, and stickiness. If you don't achieve stickiness, you get churn. And churn is a really important metric that you look at as an investor. So, how, as we're signing up more customers, customer acquisition costs, all of those factors, churn becomes a really important part of that equation. So I think customer experience really does equate very closely to churn. The less churn you've got, typically the better the product is, and stickier and more and better experience. So they are very much related.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, you go to VC meetings now, and they've increasingly got more and more metrics around customer, not just acquisition, but retention, and, lifetime value is like kind of, it's changing their understanding of it. Jane, I mean, you are, this is your day-to-day job, using tech to increase customer experience. How are you doing that at Carsales?
So at Carsales, there's a few different areas that we try and merge tech with customers' experience. I think first and foremost, it's to provide a secure, stable platform for our customers to transact without, having to worry about their data, or someone using their credit card or fraud or stuff like that. So that's first and foremost most important for technology. And then apart from that, we start getting creative and solving different customers' problem using cutting edge technology. So a recent example is we had a customer that we found out had his car plate number stolen from Carsales. So when someone gets a car and you want a car plate, you want to steal a car plate, Carsales is an easy place for someone to go and search for a similar car plate. And so he had someone driving around with the same car make and model with his car plate number and racking up a lot of fines. So when we heard that story, we were devastated, of course. So, but we had technology teams looking at the problem going, you know what, we could use machine learning to detect the car reg plate, and we could blur it. So now if you go in Carsales, we've started blurring out car registration plates so that it makes it harder for someone to come in onto our platform and do something dodgy. So and since we've done that, we've got a lot of good positive feedback from a lot of customers going, oh well, you guys go above and beyond and care about our safety and stuff like that. And it was a good fun project for the technology team, but it also drive really good customer outcomes. So yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's like we often tend to think about the really big picture things with customers and how we can make big impact. But sometimes the smallest, simplest things can have really huge impact on the lives of our customers or the way they interact with us.
And oftentimes, when customer experience or problems come into the technology team, in the past, it's all been solved by some other team, like marketing, product, and stuff like that. People, we hardly ever get involved in the process. Like, it's usually a ticket with the solution given and a expected delivery date. But involving technology into early on in the process, you find that we can very much be part of the process and the solution.
Yeah, it was a question I was going to ask you later, but now that we've touched on it, I mean, as we scale, and Chris, you'll know this, when you scale a company, tech is often the part of the business that is the closest to the customer early, but as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, they are often the furthest away. How do you guys, Jane, you especially, your experience at Carsales, stay close to the customer when you're in tech?
I think we we've early on in on our journey in Carsales realized that the importance of technology and using the people in tech and what they do to solve customers' problems. So we actually give our developers, our interns, direct access to customer feedback. So we put them onto our Slack channel as well, because that's where all technology hangs out. So we've got a Slack channel for customer feedback where we, pipe customer feedback from the App Store, from product reviews and everything like that directly into the Slack channels. And we've got developers, looking at it, going, hey, I can do something about it, and they go off doing things about it. So it's bridging the gap and not, hiding technology in the basement somewhere. And
and we don't want you to be in the basement. And we've kind of gone through that at Metricon, haven't we, Kelly? We've kind of really...
We have taken technology out from under the stairs.
We did,
recently,
literally from under the stairs. They're in like really swish new digs now, and I believe they're much more integrated to the rest of the organisation, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, that's true, though.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, speaking of customer experience, I mean, you guys at Metricon, it's, something that you're going through at the moment. You're working with Tom, who's in the audience today, and looking at customer experience. For me, Metricon's a really interesting example because, I mean, you guys build 5,000 homes a year. You're huge. You've been around for 40 years, but primarily your customers are single purchase. It is a huge personal thing, but someone will normally buy just one house from you. Why is customer experience so important to you guys if they're not going to come back?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I guess we are quite unique. So most people at Metricon, the return rate or repurchase rate is relatively low, and that's across the category. Obviously, everyone would realise buying a home is the most expensive purchase that most people will make in their lives. It's high involvement, it's highly emotional. And if you are parting with anywhere between $350,000 and $1 million to spend with a company like Metricon, then damn right you want a good customer experience. And from our point of view, we don't look at it and say they'll only buy once, so the experience doesn't matter. Of course the experience matters. Not only are they placing their trust in the biggest builder, so it's incredibly important for us that we end up with a customer who absolutely loves where they live, hence our tagline, but also that the power of word of mouth. We all know now, if somebody has a bad experience, you tell everybody. You go on any social media channel and you tell absolutely everybody about that experience. The flip side is that if they have a good experience, they also share that with friends and family. So word of mouth for us, the reputation of us as an organisation, and the power of our customers to become brand advocates, we absolutely understand that and respect that, and for that reason, everyone in the organisation understands that we have to deliver a fantastic experience for our customers every step of the way. And that journey can be 6 weeks to start building a house and within a few months have built a home. For some people, it's a 2 to 3 year journey. So we really, really need that experience to be as seamless and painless as possible.
Well, it's been incredible watching you guys, and the customer pride that you have in every interaction is pretty incredible. So one of the things, and I know you guys are also looking at, is, and one of the biggest changes that we've seen over the last 10 years is the sheer volume of data that we have about customers, all sorts of data. And that we have a choice about how we use that data as well. Kelly, you guys are doing some work around benchmarking yourself in the industry, or you're always looking to benchmark yourself. How are you doing it?
So from a customer experience point of view, I mean, there are lots of different metrics out there. There's obviously customer satisfaction, there's net promoter score, there's customer effort score, and in actual fact, we use those across the business. So there's no one metric that we're actually applying, depending on the touch point for the customer, depending on which area of the business it is, we're actually applying those metrics. And I have no doubt that they will continue to evolve over time. Probably the one area that Metricon is still very underdone in, and it's interesting Jane was mentioning it, is voice of the customer. So there is no doubt that we need a really strong voice of the customer program that will make sure that we are getting that real-time feedback from our customers as I explained, if someone's got a 2-year relationship with us, we want to know at the time they are having a pain point that they're having that, so that we can do something about it. So that's a really big focus. But customer effort score, NPS, and CSAT are all measures that we're using now.
How about you, Chris? You've seen benchmarking and data across your career. How has it changed, and what do you think that we need to do to sort of make that meaningful, all that data?
So, I mean, a number of the tech companies I work with now collect data, and that they're all different uses of that data, but fundamentally, what's really, and a good example is My Prosperity, right? So My Prosperity provides a platform for financial advisors, and then they sign up their clients and they track all their assets and liabilities. And I've been involved with them for a few years, and I was actually CEO for a couple of years. And we started looking at the back end data because we're thinking at an individual financial advisor level. It's really interesting because a lot of advisors, and we've obviously been through the whole Royal Commission, so I won't get into all that, but part of the challenge that the industry has faced is that a lot of advisors were giving advice, they actually don't really know exactly what's happening with the client, whereas this application suddenly gives you not only assets, liabilities, but real-time transaction data. Anyway, I won't do a whole pitch on the platform, but we were thinking the data is really valuable for that advisor, and then we started looking at the back end and think, holy crap, we're actually tracking over $100 billion worth of assets and liabilities across the platform. So there's obviously a big privacy overlay here, but in an aggregated format and provided it's anonymous, we can start to really understand how much money is flowing into superannuation versus property versus other asset classes, and you can start to see, Xero's done this actually really effectively, right? And I'll come back to that, but we started to see some really interesting trends in terms of where money was flowing in terms of consumers investing. So fascinating, right? Really, and it's sort of endless because you start drilling into that and you start to see some really interesting things that we can actually share to the industry and to advisors in how to actually use that data, and also benchmark themselves on other advisors in terms of portfolios and so on. It was interesting because when I was at Xero, we were collecting a whole lot of data, and I remember one of the big agencies put out this report. It said, it takes small businesses in Australia, takes them 46 days to get paid, which is a real problem for cash flow. And so we went into the back end and ran a whole lot of reports. We go, actually, if you're running Xero, it's 32. Because we know when every invoice gets paid, we know, that it was actually scary. Like, we knew how much, like, when I say no, right, so I'm no longer there, so it's cool. I can say anything. No, but we, you can actually start looking at the data and go, well, how much are small businesses, across the board spending on marketing, and, what are they paying? And, there's just staff and so forth.
There's so much information.
Incredible amount of data. So I think it was 2 years ago, Xero launched Small Business Insights, I think it is. And so they're actually providing now aggregated data because there's something like 600,000 or 700,000 small businesses in Australia using Xero. So they've actually got an insight into how the small business economy works. I mean, that's incredibly powerful. The government should be interested in that, right? So Treasury. But it just goes to show you that the data becomes super, super important with a lot of these platforms, particularly if you've got scale and you've got a lot of data, and then it's really endless in terms of how you can use that.
And the trick becomes, when you have so much data, is where are the signals? Where is the really powerful bits of data? Because you could spend so much time looking at every tiny bit of data that you have and still be unable to make a really clear decision. Sometimes the data just contradicts itself, so you just have to make a call, don't you? So on Xero, I think this is a perfect time to ask this question, is like, you guys scaled, but there is a really, there's a real challenge when you're scaling a company in terms of buyer expectations. There is a balance between, servicing your customers for scale, like how do you put out customer service that is for the masses versus sort of giving in to those early customer demands. How do you manage that?
Well, it's a great question. And I won't use the Xero example. There's another organisation I'm working with. I won't mention them just to protect the innocent or the guilty in their case. They're a really, really good platform. And this is a great example of a startup that has really listened to the customer. But they've been going for a while now, and I think they're probably listening too much because they're just trying to build lots and lots of features to please everyone, and it's really hard. And I know one of the things that Rod Drury, the founder of Xero, early on, we had conversations about this because I'd come into the market and I was used to Microsoft. Things were quite slow there by comparison. So Xero was running really quickly, but it got to the point where I think, it's actually not fast enough. There's a lot of things that Australia needs, and we had to really prioritise it because you've got limited resources. And back then, Xero didn't have a lot of capital, so it was, we had to really prioritise things. But Rod used to say, look, there are things that we are going to listen to with our customers, and obviously we need to build for that. But there's also, the customer doesn't always know, or the customer, you can't try and build everything. And when you're building a SaaS platform, scaling it, you need to, there's one version, right? So there is a trade-off. So you can't, in the old days, you'd sort of build bespoke pieces of custom code and everything to please everyone, but it becomes a nightmare to manage, and to build it, it's just too costly. So you do have to kind of standardise effectively. And accounting is a good example of where, it's pretty standard. But there are other applications which, you can get that scope creep into different areas. You just have to make a trade-off call, because otherwise it becomes too hard to manage.
Yeah, there is a point in time where you just kind of say, we are big enough now, we've got enough sort of cash coming in the door that we can afford to sort of standardise much more. And that's when you start seeing like separation. And
and Rod had a simple formula. Is like, there's stuff we need to do to keep the lights on, which is sort of boring stuff. There's stuff we need to do to keep customers happy that they're asking for. And then there's really cool stuff that they haven't even thought of that we're going to give them. They're going to go, holy shit, that's awesome. And that was sort of the formula. And Xero would bring out, stuff that everyone would go crazy. It's like, wow, that's really awesome. We've been waiting for that about time. And then I'm trying to think of an example. I can't. But then we'd release something and it was like, holy crap, like we didn't see that coming. And I think that's the trick, is getting the balance right across those sort of three categories.
Yeah, that's right. You can
that's
tend
the innovation
to
piece.
Yeah, you can tend to forget some of those because you're always scrambling to sort of respond to customer sort of demands, and which is great because customers can, if they're demanding things from you, then they're seeing potential in the product, they're using it, and they're engaged, so they want more from you. But it's about balancing and also talking to them and managing their expectations around what the product can do now versus what the future. Well, Kelly, you guys have so many customers. How do you manage their expectations? You could, there's so many different things you could have in a home. Like what is the level of customization versus just kind of giving them a good sort of solid experience that is scalable?
Yes, well, that's very interesting, because Metricon is not an architect. We are a volume builder. And when you are a volume builder, it's actually all about scale. That's what the business model is. So how do you take that home and replicate it in a very scalable way for cost savings to our customers? But obviously everybody is living in a home and they want that home to be an expression of themselves. So we have obviously tailored our product offerings, the pricing around our product offerings. We've segmented our market for different customer types. So a first-time buyer has much less money. They still want a beautiful home, but they might get a lot less customisation than somebody who's spending over $1 million or $2 million and has much higher expectations, where you are effectively competing against the guys that build custom-built architectural designed homes, but we're giving them a better price, basically. So there's a bit of a continuum. We very much design our product and our pricing and the offering to the different segments that we've identified in the market. So it's absolutely about our customers at the end of the day and trying to meet their needs.
Jane, how about you guys at Carsales? I know you're always bringing out sort of new products and new ways to support your customers. How are you deciding what the products that you will build for your dealers versus the products you build for your end customer?
I think it's very much like Kelly said, so apart from a house, the car is probably the second biggest purchase you make in your life. So for us, it's being able to understand why a user is coming onto our platform to buy a car. Is it because they're growing their family? Is it their first car, or is it a second car into their home? So the earlier we are able to identify that, the better and more personalized experience we'll be able to serve to the customer. We've a few years back started a community that we call the Loop. And it's made out of around 5,000 of our active members. And what we do with them is we give them, insights into our product roadmap, even before we start building them, really. They get to come into the office and get to meet the product team and the technology team, and they very actively give us feedback as to whether what they think we're building will work for them or not. In fact, we've even invited them to our hackathons, like our technology team hackathons, where they come in and they are judges, really. They vote for who wins in a customer experience category. And so involving the customers in our journey and truly trying to understand and bring them on a journey of making the right decision to find the right car for them, that's important to us. Yeah.
How often are you revisiting who your customer is, and how they're changing?
I think almost day to day, right? Like
Yeah.
we've got different sort of customers. We've got the users coming onto our website trying to buy a car, and then we've got people trying to sell a car, and then we've got the car dealers as well. So I think we've got teams focusing on trying to understand all these different customers and interacting with them on a day-to-day basis, and bridging the gap between us versus the customer.
So it's kind of everyone's job to know and understand the customer.
It's definitely a culture within Carsales. Like it's not just a customer experience team, and we do have a customer experience team. It's not just marketing. It's everyone in the company being able to understand that we're here because we have customers, and we're here to help them buy and sell. Really,
Not every company has a customer experience team, though. I mean, Carsales is probably ahead of the game by having a customer experience team.
Yep.
I mean, Kelly, it's something we've talked a lot about at Metricon is, where does CX actually sit? Who owns the customer? Who fundamentally owns the customer? Who is allowed to have customer touch points? Tell us about how you guys are thinking about it.
Yeah, it's very topical at Metricon currently. So, often someone will say, who does own the customer, Kelly? And I kind of look at them weirdly, but because, the obvious answer is every single person at Metricon owns the customer. We all turn up every day for our jobs, and ultimately it is about those 5,000 people that we build homes for every year. And obviously there are some roles that are customer facing and there are some that are not. For our average customer, they would touch probably 40 to 50 people along their journey, which is a huge number of people.
Yeah, that's a lot.
When you think about that journey for building a home. So that means it's really important that everybody is very customer focused. But in saying that, the default at the moment is actually that marketing are ending up owning the customer. I think, we don't have a customer experience team per se. We have talked about having a customer. We've talked about having a head of customer who would lead that. And that's not about taking away the customer focus across the organisation. But like most things, if you really want focus and you really want somebody focused on championing the customer across the organisation, then having that head of customer, having it at the C-suite level, making sure that everybody from the top down is really focused on it, I think is absolutely critical. And for Metricon, it's baby steps. It's just a matter of time, I think, before we do that. In the meantime, it absolutely sits with my team at the moment, which is fine because we love the customer too.
Yeah, exactly. But you're right. It's like giving the customer a C-suite voice is more and more important, given how important the customer is to actually driving revenue and growth. We can't ignore it anymore. It's just a question of what it looks like. Do we actually need a chief customer officer, Chris, do you think? Or do you think that sits somewhere else? Who has the responsibility?
Well, I think Kelly answered it really well. I mean, I think it does, it spans the organisation. It's certainly, I'm involved in a number of different tech companies, and I think the better ones around customer experience, the ones where the CEO, the person at the top, really buys into that whole notion that, they're obsessed. I mean, Rod Drury, I talked about Phil Feeling, but Rod Drury was obsessive about customer experience as well. And it was interesting, going back on the Xero example, when I started in late 2010, and I started going to events and just wanted to look at what the competitors were doing. And it really occurred to me, I thought, my God, this is an industry that I actually thought, the software providers at the time had really made it boring. And so when we actually sat back and thought about customer experience beyond product, it was how do we create a really, really different experience for accountants and bookkeepers that when they interact with us at every level. So product, but beyond product, it was branding, website, it was marketing, it was our salespeople coming to events. How do we create a totally different experience where they just go, wow, that's just crazy? And we really set about to try and turn the industry on its head and make accountants and bookkeepers rock stars, right? And I could go through so many examples, but the one I remember vividly was at the beginning of 2012. We'd been out on the roadshow. First roadshow in 2011, and we had, in some cases I'd go to. I just heard that in Brisbane Xero's doing a roadshow. They had 1,500 people in Brisbane. I'm like, I remember when we did Brisbane in May 2011. We had so few people in the audience that I made some of the add-ons go to their hotel room, put on a shirt and come down and pretend to be accountants.
Amazing.
Because it was embarrassing. There was like 5 people turned up. So it's really funny seeing that change. But winding the clock back, early 2012, we ran a roadshow. We got 400 people in Melbourne, and I had a new girl start in marketing, and we're running around. At the end of the day, I said to her, so what do you think? And she just went, it's a friggin' cult. Because it literally, like, people were just... going crazy, like, my God, this Xero thing's so new and it's so cool, and like you really get us, and you're trying to turn the industry into something that's, different. And so...
But that's what we're all trying to do now,
that's
create
right.
cults,
so customer
basically.
experience, we talk a lot about product, but I think, in those early days, it was really interesting case study for me to go through that journey and see how every part of the organisation, as Kelly's pointed out, becomes part of the experience. And if you can nail that, then you're unbeatable.
And the CEO's role?
I think the CEO needs to orchestrate that and continually to communicate to all parts of the organisation the role that they play, no matter how insignificant they may feel. To me, one of the biggest, one of the tech startups I work for, they haven't got everything right, but the support's awesome. Like, it is awesome. And you talk to any of their customers and they say, they just nail it compared to a lot of the competitors. So we can get the other bits right, then I'm happy. But so that's a good example. So you've got to focus. You've got to have someone at the very top that's obsessive about it, that's really trying to create, a great experience for the customer at all interactions.
That's so true. I mean, your early customers will forgive you anything if they really, really like you and they love your brand. And do you think that we're in this era? We went through this era of having, the product-led CEO, the sales-led CEO. Are we entering this era of having the customer-led CEO? Is that something? Or for any of the panelists?
No, look, I think if you're not, history will show that customer-focused CEOs, will win. I mean, that's important. I think what we're talking about here is that notion of experience and embedding that across all parts of the organisation, because I think traditional models was that you might have a very customer-centric CEO. In fact, when I was at uni at Swinburne years ago, my lecturer used to talk about the fact that, most CEOs of companies started in sales and that's not always the case now, certainly not engineering and everything, so it's no longer a golden rule. But it was interesting, the point he was trying to make was, if you really understand the customer and you have a responsibility to bring revenue into the organisation, which ultimately what every organisation needs to survive, there's no better way to learn all that than actually being in sales, and that's ultimately, where a lot of CEOs come from. So I think customer-focused leaders are vital in any organisation, but what we're talking about here is how you actually look at every part of the organisation and become obsessed around customer experience. And I think that is starting to come to the fore a lot more.
Yep.
Beyond just product, building a good product, it's the whole journey, and how do you make that interaction really, really special for the customer at each interaction.
So we probably have time for one more big question before we get to Q&A or questions from you guys. We've talked a lot about the customer and customer experience, but we haven't talked a lot about how you actually go about creating a CX strategy and implementing. What are your tips about how to get that, created and also implemented? You need a team to implement it. Kelly, what are your thoughts on that? It's a tough question, right?
We don't have a head of customer.
And you can talk about CX a lot, but actually doing and implementing is a different thing.
That's right, and I guess it's an interesting conversation that the MD and I have on a regular basis, because nobody actually understands the Metricon business and our customers like the people sitting in our office, the people that deal with our customers on a day-to-day basis. So you could just put a label on somebody and say, there's a customer experience manager, off you go. But actually, what I have argued with him is that we might be experts in what we do and how we help our customers, but this, customer experience is now this much bigger thing. There are people that have experience in setting strategies, and I have argued that we need to bring in somebody with those skills who will elevate customer experience inside the organisation and actually guide the right people and bring together the right people to actually start mapping and planning and implementing that strategy. They either do that or they pick somebody up out of their current job that they think has those skills and make it their role. Because asking somebody who is already full to the gills in their day job to actually take it on as an additional project, I think is probably setting it up for failure. I don't profess to be an expert in customer experience. I know that there are lots of people out there who are. So what we're trying to do is work with external advisors to help bring that skill in, like we would for anything else. If you're reviewing your tech stack, your marketing tech stack, you work with somebody externally. So I actually think the same applies to customer experience, and I would love to ultimately bring on somebody who we will add into the team, who will bring that expertise, but work really closely with the people that are at the coalface in the organisation.
Yeah, certainly, we can all be obsessed with customers, but it is a very specific skill that certain people have, and they work in every day. I mean, Jane, you guys actually have a CX team. What impact do you see from them every day?
I think our CX team, although I think what they do is very much advocate and, be the people that drive the whole CX culture within Carsales. So what they do every day is really work with all the different departments, the different teams, and really push and really be the voice of the customers in our meetings, be it a technology meeting, be it a marketing meeting, a product meeting, or even a sales meeting. Be there to, speak on behalf of the customer and pass feedback on, I think. Yeah.
Chris, any final thoughts on CX strategies and how we do them?
I'll contradict a little bit of what I said earlier, which was every part of the organisation needs to focus on it. But if you are going to start anywhere, it's product, right? Product wins hands down. And there's been many, many examples of great tech companies that have not had sales or marketing or even a website. In fact, one of them I'm working with, where they had no sales or marketing and they got to 2,000 customers. And so it was because of the product. So I think if you're going to start anywhere, it's been obsessive about the product and the product experience, making sure it's really sticky and you have incredible utility that people cannot live without once they start using it. That's where you start. And then as you expand and scale, then you have to think about all the other interactions within the organisation that start to reinforce that experience. But I think, I have a bias towards product. I think it's really, really super important, and particularly in software that is the product. And again, many, many examples of tech companies going viral on the back of just building really great software, and then other things need to follow, but that's the starting point.
It's true. It's the product and the customer together which is like the central part of any business. And you can have the greatest marketing, machine in the world to roll that out, but at the end of the day, you're not going to keep your customers unless you have a product that they love.